Okay, stating a proper motivation which has three parts. One, what to visualize. Visualize Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of you. And how you visualize them. They are like your very affectionate parents, and you come home demoralized from your school and bullied by the elder children. Your parents are waiting there with full love, affection, attention, and so forth. Next is Bodhicitta field. You visualize your two grandparents on your two sides, and all your family members, all the sentient beings around you, living on a side. Here you are the mother, and all others are like your children. And imagine that they come home demoralized, and you are there to give full love, affection, attention, and embrace, to the extent that each one of them feels themselves as so special in your eyes. And the purpose of this class is finally to discover the gold-like Buddha nature, the diamond-like Buddha nature that exists within each one of us. That's the ultimate treasure of happiness that exists within each one of us, which is at the moment mixed with the mental defilements, obscured by the mental defilements, which made us not to see this amazingly precious Buddha nature, amazingly precious treasure of the happiness within us. And that is like the gold when mixed with the soil in the ore, gold ore, you don't see the gold. Only when you remove the soil, then the gold starts to glow. Likewise, when the metal defilements are removed, then the gold-like or the diamond-like Buddha nature within us will start to become manifest, and that the ultimate happiness comes to you, and that one never experience any pain anymore. So this mental defilement, this has to be eradicated. It is for this reason that Acharya Nagabodhi, one of the disciples of Arjuna, said, the Buddhahood is not bestowed upon you by anyone, nor the cause of the Buddhahood is held by anyone for you. It is through discovering the Buddha nature, the ultimate treasure of the Buddha nature within you, that you can achieve Buddhahood. So it becomes very clear from this stanza that we all have the capacity to achieve the highest happiness, the highest goal. And yet it is temporarily obscured by the mental defilements. And the mental defilements, there are of two kinds, the gross and the subtle. The gross one stops us from achieving nirvana, achieving freedom from the fears of samsara. And the gross one is constituted of three parts: contaminated karmas, afflictive emotions, contaminated karmas such as the 10 non-virtuous actions, the physical, verbal, and mental negativities, and the afflictive emotions such as attachment, anger, jealousy, and so forth, and the active imprints, active seeds of the contaminated karmas and afflictions. These all are rooted to the self-grasping ignorance. So we can uproot this self-grasping ignorance by introducing the light of the wisdom. So the text which we are going to study now, this is primarily to activate the seed of the wisdom, to dispel the darkness of the ignorance. And then on the other hand, we have the subtle stains, also referred to as the cognitive obscurations, the presence of which disturbs us, presence of which stops us from achieving total omniscience, total enlightenment of Buddhahood. And this can be eradicated by the same remedy, the wisdom of emptiness, but this time the motivation, the driving force should be much, much more powerful than the renunciation. Renunciation, on top of renunciation, there should be the bodhicitta, unconditional love towards all sentient beings. So with that in mind, imagine that your two parents and all sentient beings, they are joining you, and you are leading this congregation. Page 2. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's go to page 7. Page 7. From the bottom. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Sanye joda zoge jonam la chanjo bardo dane gyapso che age jinso gebe chonam ge jola benjire sanye rubarai sho Sanye joda zoge jonam la gebe chonam ge jola benjire sanye rubarai sho Sanye joda soge chonam Chanjo bardo dane gyapso che Dage jinso gebe sonam ge Dola benjire sanye rubarai sho. All phenomena arise from causes. The causes are taught by the Tathagata. The cessation of causes as well as taught by Gracia. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava Hetum deshan tathagato yavatat desham chayo nirodha evam vati mahashramana yesva Om ye dharma hetu prabhava Hetum deshan tathagato yavatat desham chayo nirodha evam vati mahashramana yesva Om ye dharma prabhavam Hetum deshan tathagato yavatat desham chayo nirodha evam vati mahashramana yesva. Okay, page 17, Heart Sutra Mantra. Yes, recite the mantra. This mantra is very precious. And in fact, it has the capacity to eradicate all the obstacles which can potentially come in the way to our seeking a happy life, meaningful life, so your career or whatever. So here, imagine that of the 7 billion human beings, how many people really get the opportunity to recite this and reap the benefit out of this recitation. So we are just those handful who get this opportunity. So while this being a great opportunity, why not we also include our 2 parents and all the dear sentient beings, all the family members, all sentient beings, let them also have this opportunity for to recite this and reap the benefit, to dispel the darkness of the ignorance, and that they experience the boundless happiness. So with that in mind, let's recite it 7 times. Diyata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisvaha Diyata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisvaha Dhyata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisvaha Dhyata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Gati Bodhi Swaha Dhyata Om Gati Gati Parvati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha Dhyata Gati Parvati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha Dhyata Om Gati Gati Parvati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha. Okay, next page 19, 8 verses of my training. With the determination to achieve the highest aim for the benefit of all sentient beings, which surpasses even the wish-fulfilling gem, may I hold them dear at all times. Whenever I interact with someone, may I view myself as the lowest among all, and from the very depths of my heart, respectfully hold others as superior. In all my deeds, may I probe into my mind, and as soon as mental and emotional afflictions arise, as they endanger myself and others, may I strongly confront them and avert them. When I see beings of unpleasant character, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as I have discovered a true treasure. When others out of jealousy treat me wrongly with abuse, slander, and scorn, may I take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory. When someone whom I have held or in whom I have placed great hopes mistreats me in explosive and hurtful ways, may I regard him still as my precious teacher. In brief, may I offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly. May I quietly take upon myself all hurts and pains of my mothers. May all this remain undefiled by the stains of 8 mundane concerns, and may I, recognizing all things as illusions, devoid of clinging, be released from bondage. From my 2 collections, vast space that I have amassed, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the shielded and Buddha for all those whose minds wisdom is blinded with ignorance. Okay. We'll do a quick 5-minute meditation. Okay, for the meditation, I'd like to give a quick instruction. The meditation that we're going to do here, others who are already exposed to meditation, you feel free to do whatever meditation they were to do. Those who are new, it is good to do the breathing meditation, that it will help us to stabilize or build concentration, and say your mind will be freed from the vulnerability of, say, easily being affected by external factors. So this is what we are going to be protected from. This meditation, the breathing meditation, will be very helpful. Okay. Every now and then, when we go through mental disturbance, agitation, and so forth, it's good if you can go to your room, just lock from or latch from inside, sit comfortably, and then just do a little bit of breathing, slow, gentle breathing, and then do this meditation for some time. This will be extremely beneficial to cool down your mind, and the agitation all will disappear. For this, we need to think of 4 points. One is the body posture. Number 2 is the focal point. Number 3 is identifying the errors of meditation. Number 4 is applying the remedies to overcome the errors. So 4 points to keep in mind. One is body posture. For the body posture, sitting cross-legged, if possible, sitting cross-legged. If you have the trouble, no problem. Just sit whatever position is better for you. Next is the body upright. Unless you have backache problem, always try to maintain the body upright position. And while your body is upright, make it flexible. It should not be rigid. It should be flexible. And then the head tilted forward a little bit, And later on, then you can do a meditation with head in whatever position does matter. It's not really mandatory. And your eyes, that is very important. Your eyes not close, never close the meditation with your eye. You never close the eyes when you do meditation. There are times as you get come out of the meditation for extended period of time. There are times when you might there are kinds of meditations which one engages with eyes closed, but otherwise, for beginners, it is always best to do a meditation with eyes open. How half open, 45 degrees cast down, and then the tip of your tongue should touch the upper palate. The tip of the tongue should touch the upper palate to avoid excessive accumulation of saliva in the mouth. And then teeth and the lips, keep them in the natural state. And your right hand on the left hand, and the tips of the two thumbs standing, forming a triangle. Place the two hands on your laps in a restful state. And breathe naturally. Don't impose your breath, don't force a breath, don't control your breath. Breathe naturally. So this is your body posture. Number two is the focal point. Focal point is what you're going to meditate on. You're going to focus on a very tiny dot, very tiny white dot, 1 mm or 2 mm in diameter between nose and upper lip. This is where you can focus the tiny dot. While you focus the mind there, you the multitasking, count your breath. Breathe in, breathe out, cycle 1. Breathe in, breathe out, cycle 2. This is what we're going to count while we focus the mind on the tiny dot. This is your focal point. Number 3 is identifying the errors of meditation. This is very important. Number 3 and number 4 is exceptionally important. Identify the errors of meditation. What mistakes can happen when you do the meditation? There are 2 mistakes or 2 errors. One is mental laxity, when your mind becomes very lethargic, your mind feels very heavy and sloppy and slippy and sinking. This is one error. And other errors when your mind becomes scattered here and there. One gets scattered here and there. These are the 2 errors. And we are bound to go through any of these 2 errors. And should any of these 2 errors, don't panic. You go for number 4. Number 4 is applying remedies. And there are 2 remedies: introspection and mindfulness. Introspection is like, say, when you lost your pet dog, you go in search of the pet dog. Go in search of the pet dog. Your mind, meditative mind, is like the pet dog. When you lost the dog, when you go in search of the dog, this is the introspection, to see whether your mind is still meditating or is it distracted or in that state. Should you see that the moment you see your dog, you find your dog, the job of the introspection is done. Next is the job of the rope. With the rope, you tie the dog, bring the dog, with the rope, with the help of the rope, you bring the dog back to your home. Likewise, here when you find your mind is distracted or in a relaxed state, the job of the introspection is done. Next is the job of the mindfulness. Now with the help of your mind, with the rope-like mindfulness, bring the mind back to the intended object of the meditation, which is the position between your nose and upper lip. Okay, these are 4 points that we need to keep in mind. Ready? Okay. Okay. From what we read from the prayer and meditation manual, the Buddha summarized his teachings in one stanza. We said, commit no evils, accumulate as great wealth of virtues as possible, subdue mind. This is the meaning, this is the teaching of the Buddha. This seems very simple teaching, at the same time it's a very comprehensive, and you can interpret the same teaching on various levels. So to summarize it says, commit no evils. Given that we don't want suffering and we want happiness, and if we are able to make the suffering zero and make the happiness the maximum, this is the meaning of life. And the question is, how can we do that? Whether or not that is possible. First question. In the first place, whether or not it's possible. If it is possible, how? So the mantra which we read, Om Ye Dharma Hetu Prabhava, where the Buddha said that all phenomena, they arise from the respective causes. Happiness which we see also arises from the causes, and the miseries which we shun also from the causes. So, as long as the causal miseries are there with us, even though we don't want miseries, they will invariably arise in us. Although we want happiness, if the causes of the happiness are not with us, we can't really have the happiness. Although we crave for it, we yearn for it. So with this, knowing that the cause of the miseries, they are known as the non-virtues, the evils. It is for this reason, what makes us miserable, they are known as evils. So the Buddha said, commit no evils, because we don't want miseries. If you don't want miseries, don't commit any evils. Number two, what we want is we want happiness. Because we want happiness, happiness comes from virtues. So the Buddha said, accumulate as great virtues as possible. And how to do that? How to commit no evils and how to accumulate virtues, how to gather virtues. Knowing that evils are also mental state and virtues are also mental state. So learn how to tame your mind. When we allow mind to go astray, then it goes to do things which are so nasty. So that is known as evil, and evil brings miseries in us. So tame our mind, not to engage in the nasty, in the wrong deeds, in the negativities. Tame our mind. And then our mind is not at all strong to accumulate virtues. It's so weak. For the virtues, even for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we see it's so difficult. For non-virtues, so if 24 hours is so less for us. So therefore, for the virtues, our mind is so weak. So tame our mind so that our mind becomes stronger, that it can engage in the virtues very freely, spontaneously, and for a long time. So this tame your mind. Finally, what we should be doing is to tame our mind. Tame our mind, and this is the teaching of the Buddha. So now the next question is how to tame the mind. For that, we see that what drives our mind to become so weak, what drives our mind to become so violent with regards to the evil, and so weak with regards to the virtue, is because we are under the sway of the ignorance. We want happiness, we don't know how to embrace happiness. This is ignorance. We don't want suffering, but we are so actively after suffering. This is ignorance. So finally we see that at the base of all the untamed mind is the ignorance. So ignorance pertaining to the self and pertaining to the world. This is the ignorance which underscores all our, miserable experiences and the lack of happiness. So, For this ignorance pertaining to self, we tend to misconceive the self and we tend to misconceive the world. So here, the text which we are studying now, are the 400 verses. We're doing chapter 10, stanza 242 is actually done. So here, stanza 10 is how to eradicate the ignorance pertaining to the self, misconception of the self. Misconception of the self. Page 242. Same misconception of self can happen in two ways. One which is a natural inborn misconception, also known as the innate ignorance. Page 29. Page 29, stanza 242. The ignorance, one is the natural or innate ignorance, which exists within us since day one we are born. Since day one we are born, there's ignorance within us. And on this base of this ignorance, then all the negative emotions arise. Even for, day one child, because they cannot really coordinate between their body and the mind. They cannot really coordinate. Whereas age 2, they can coordinate so well, and then there you will see that they are not really newborn. They're very old, because we can see that since a young child, they know how to be so cunning. Not all, most of us, right? We so cunning, how to be cunning. At age 2, and there's the ego there. Even at age 2, I could see that ego is so vivid there. So from these, we see that underlying all these things is the ignorance. So this misconception, the ignorance that we inherit since our childhood, these are more the innate, the afflictions or the innate ignorance. And then later on, when you reach age like say 5, 10, 11, 12, then you meet with different people, and then you meet with different books. Then from there, then you learn. Some people, they learn how to dismantle this ignorance. Some books will tell you how to reinforce the ignorance. Some books will tell you how this is not ignorance, actually it is just ignorance. They reinforce your ignorance, and some books will teach us how to dismantle ignorance. So we meet with different books, and different teachers, and different environment, different people, and so forth. Okay, so finally, the point is that we need to have a sense of a rational thinking. This is so important, rational thinking. And on this ground of the rational thinking, then the faith grounded on the intelligence, faith grounded on the intelligence. This is so precious, so precious. And sometimes just purely rational without any faith involved. That is not so healthy, may not be so healthy. And then, say, pure faith without the intelligence, it could be very dangerous. It could be very dangerous. For example, Angulimala, how Angulimala became such a robber is because of William robber, is because of following a wrong instruction, right? So they're following wrong instruction, and then not knowing without the rationality, just blindly following, and it made him into a villain, right? Likewise, nowadays, say in the name of religions, so many massive killings are happening. It's all because of total blind faith, following total blind faith. Whereas within different religions, whether say Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, where people are more rational, they will never engage into these kind of, say, the violence. So the fact that people end up into violence, for sure, underneath that is the blind faith mixed. So blind faith is very dangerous, very dangerous. So with this in mind, the rationally speaking, or to sensibly see how our miseries arise, we see that in all the miseries, in all the pains that we go through, invariably we see one thing which is always intact there. That is, I am in pain. This person was unfair towards me. Always this I is connected. This I is connected. Whereas we never say that, oh, I'm so much pain because this person is harming that person, because that person is harming that animal. So less of that kind. All the agitation that we have, somehow they connected to I. Why? So the misperception pertaining to the I that is actively involved in all forms of the miseries, the pains that we go through. Misperception of the ignorance, let's say the I. If we can dismantle this misperception of I, say, if we can see that this I is not really as solid as how we think it is, if we see that this I is less solid, if we are able to dissolidify this I, the more we are able to dissolidify the I, and then we see that we are less bothered by the external factors. We are less affected by external factors. So that way, our peace of mind is restored, and our mind will not be into turbulence as much. So, when your mind is away from the turbulence, you get to peace. You experience the peace. So, for that matter, to disqualify the self, one, we tend to see ourselves as like say, a very solid self. For example, say, in the dream, if somebody dreams of, or if somebody dreamt as the same, as the king of the kingdom or empire. Although the person may be just a commoner, and a person dreams of being a king. And a king means he has a specific responsibility, authority, power, ego, all these things are there. On that basis, the person will act. And if somebody does not accord the kind of the respect that usually people give to the king, and then when you don't receive it, then your ego is so badly hurt. And as the king, you have the authority, you have the power. And when you wake up, you realize that identity was just a dream. I'm not at all a king, I'm just an ordinary person. Right? So there we see that we dissolidify the solidity of the self which you had in a dream. Okay, now, so as I said earlier, oftentimes what happens is that one, we already have the misperception of self to be so solid, one. Number two, over time, by encountering with books, teachers, systems, and so forth, the sense of self is even more solidified through additional philosophy. So when these two things happen, then the chance for us to get out of this suffering is much less. Now, say the chapter 10, it is primarily to dissolidify the sense of self. That too, it does in two ways. One, to dissolidify the philosophical position of the solidification of the self, to dissolidify that one. And number two is to solidify the innate self, sense of the innate self. Okay, so with that one we are doing now 242. One group of the philosophers, they see, and I remember His Holiness, at one point when he was giving teachings, he would begin by saying that there are three questions. One, what is the self? Number two, where did this self come from? Number 3, where will this self go? Right? Okay, this is a very interesting 3 questions. One is, what is this self? Number 2, where did this self come from? From where did it come? It came. Number 2, where will it go? Only if you identify what this self is so well, then you will know where it came from and where it will go. Right? So for example, modern science, particularly neuroscientists, hardcore neuroscientists, most of the hardcore neuroscientists may say that the self is nothing but the activation of the brain, activation of the neurons. Because this activation of the neurons, when you first have when you first conceived in the mother's womb, that is the self, and it came from nowhere. Because they identify the self with the bunch of neurons. And because of that, when the neurons stop functioning, you disappear, you die, you disappear. So there's no continuation. This is how some of the neuroscientists would identify the self to be like, and on that basis, the remaining 2 questions are answered. Then, most of the classical Indian traditions, they would identify the self not with the bunch of the neurons, nor with the body. Either they would identify the self as something different from the body and the mind, as something different. They call it soul, they call it Atman. And when the self is identified as of that nature, then naturally it came from past life. Then it will go to the next life. So this is their position. Now, another class of philosophers would identify the self. There's no such a self which is different from the body and mind. There's no self which is body and mind. Just as a table is, there's no table different from the table legs and the top plank. There's no house different from the roof, the walls, the floor. But there's a house on the basis of, by dependence on these parts, the house comes into being. By dependence on the parts like the legs and the top of the table comes into being. Likewise, by dependence on the body and the mind, the self comes into being. There's no separate self. If you remove the walls, the roof, and the floor, there's no separate house left there. Likewise, if you remove the body and the mind, there's no self left there. But there was one class of philosophers, the philosophy, which believe that there is a self which is different from the body and the mind. So the Acharya Aryadeva is trying to dismantle that view, saying that as long as you have this view, it will not help you, it will harm you. Harm you by solidifying the self, by reinforcing the self to be more solid, and the more you reinforce it, more you will cling to it. The more you cling to it, the less you will be liberated from samsara. Okay, so with this stanza 242 and the down till the end, it's all to dismantle such a strong sense of self, which believes that the self is something independent of the body and mind. The body and mind, these two are impermanent, but the self is permanent. Yeah? And how the self is permanent, they identify the self, they identify the self as something universal, cosmic. They use the label cosmic consciousness. Right? The self is as pervasive as the cosmos. Okay, 1. And some identify the self as whatever the size of your body, that is the self. Some identify like this. So there are various ways of identifying the self within the domain of those who believe the self to be permanent, as a permanent entity. Okay, so Aryadeva is saying 242. Active is not permanent. If the self is permanent means it doesn't change. If it doesn't change, then the activity is not there. Activity of, for example, say going to have lunch. Oh, I'm hungry. I like to go to have lunch, which means state from not having lunch, you have to change to there should be activity to change to having lunch. Where there was hunger disappears. So these changes are possible only if things are impermanent. Impermanence and change, these two are synonymous. Whereas if things are permanent, then you cannot have any change involved. Without the change, activity is not there. So the self should not have activity if the self is permanent. Okay. Active is not permanent. The ubiquitous is actionless. Ubiquitous meaning, say, the omnipresent. What is present everywhere? What is present everywhere cannot have action. Should be actionless. Actionless meaning, so action means, okay, I'm here, okay, now I have to go to the end to touch the prayer flags. So I have to move. That is action. Whereas if I'm present everywhere, I'm here, I'm where the flag is, I'm outside, I'm inside, then the movement is not there. Action is not there. So the ubiquitous is actionless. Actionless is like the non-existent. If something does not have the action, then for us, why we are going to study philosophy, why we practice dharma and so forth, because as a means to get rid of our miseries, right? As a means to get rid of miseries. So we have the miseries. I want to get rid of the miseries. From the state of misery, I want to be free from miseries. There's a change happening. Change is what we're expecting. So it says, actionless is like non-existent. What is related to me should have changes and should have action. Action to make, which is person who is miserable, there should be action involved to change it to miserylessness, state of miseryless. Okay. So if there is no action at all, if something is actionless, then we are totally unrelated to that. There's nothing to do with that for us. For us, it is like non-existent. Actionless is like the non-existent. Why do you not prefer selflessness? Okay, so from this, if you believe in the self to be permanent, as a separate from the body and mind, all these contradictions are there. So if you don't want to be in these contradictions, the best thing is to discard your belief in the solidified self to be permanent. The next question, does the self exist or not from the point of view of the Acharya Aryadeva, or from your point of view, does the self exist or not? Yes, it does exist. If the self doesn't exist, why should we put effort? Self does exist, but what it says, why do you not prefer selflessness? Meaning, why do you not prefer the self to be the selflessness in the context of a permanent self? In the context of permanent self. Why don't you go for accepting the self to be selflessness in the context of a permanent self? In other words, why don't you discard the idea of a permanent self? Right? Okay. 243. Okay, next question. In case, if you are the one who come to see the inconsistencies in accepting a permanent self, and then as Aryadeva said, why do you not prefer selflessness? So, if you are to reject permanent self, right? Permanent self, then how can you account for your liberating yourself from suffering? How can you account for such a self? If there is no self, then what is going to be liberated? This is the question. So how would you defend that? Anyone? Yes, Tejala? No? Okay, now Tejala becomes the category of the mic. Anyone else who has to give the answer? In case if the self does not exist permanently, if you reject the self to be permanent, that the body and the mind, these two are impermanent, and the self, if you believe that the self is different from the body and mind is impermanent, but the self is permanent. Now, pointing to all these contradictions, you're given the choice that only choice left is that you give up the idea of the permanent self. If you give up the idea of the permanent self, how can you explain the self then? Self, which should be freed from suffering. How can you explain for the self? Anyone? No idea?
So, having rejected a self separate from a body and mind, we say that the self, then what we have is our body and mind. So the self exists based on our body and mind. It exists as an entity which is labeled as a combination of body and mind. And our suffering, we are suffering because of our ignorance, seeing things, our ignorance which does not view things in accord with the reality. And we have to eliminate that in order to be free from suffering.
If the self, then in which case you are saying that self is impermanent.
Self is impermanent.
If the self is impermanent, then when you die, the self is gone. Then the self discontinues.
So, so the thing is that self, the self is we have to understand self. It is impermanent, but it continues in the form of continuum. So we have a general self which pervades the three times, an underlying self which continues since in the past, present, and future, and it is impermanent because it is changing.
But say the self, you are saying that self, it exists in past, present, and future. So the self, yet the self is impermanent. Right?
Yes.
So yes, the self exists 2016, self exists 2017, self exists 2018. But when we die, so that is 3 times within the one lifespan. When we die, the self disappears because self is impermanent. If the self disappears, then where is nirvana?
So when we, so the underlying self which is posited in 3 times, not just in this life, but also in past lives, including past lives, present life, and future lives. So the underlying self, self of this life.
Okay, so the self which exists in 3 times means not only within the span of this life, but also the past of the past life, future of the future life. Okay, my question is, in this life, if you say the self is impermanent, it's fine. But if the self existed in the past lives, beginningless time, and then today and beginningless time in endlessly down. So then it's eternal, it's permanent.
So we have to, in this case, we have to understand the difference between when we say eternal and permanent. So we have to make the distinction that eternal means something that exists since beginningless time and will continue to exist as forever in the future. But the permanence means, impermanent would mean that it does not remain same, it keeps changing. So permanent doesn't mean.
So it means I become you, you become I, changing?
Changing means?
Because it does not change, it remains I all the time.
So it as underlying continuum, it keeps changing, and based on these different instances, we label we label an I on top of those different
Okay,
instances.
so the I exists as I in all 3 times, in the past lives, this life, next life, all times, but it keeps changing on the basis of the change in the base of destination. Change of the body, then the self also changes, but the self remains as self, but the second moment is different from the first moment. First moment is different from the previous moment. This is how it changes. But overall, still, there's a continuum of the self. This is what he's saying.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Tejala, you want to add more? Huh? Okay, Kumala.
What I feel is self, if we look at the self in terms of previous life, present life, and future life, then we can say that there is a permanency of self in terms of continuities. But self as a changing factors. The self that was before is not the self that right now it is. Self that will be after will not be what it is right now. In that way, permanency of self is there.
Impermanency.
Impermanency of self is there. So, like, whatever, like, the karmic things that we have done, whatever deed that we have, merit that we have done, so the things, the medium which will carry the that merit in the next life or the future life is that the continuation of that self.
Okay. So the self can be understood in two ways. One is in the form of the continuum. In the form of continuum, we can say the self is permanent or eternal. So that permanence in terms of the continuum is not, it doesn't mean that the self is permanent. So the distinction has to be made between the self to be permanent and the continuum of self to be permanent. The permanence in terms of continuum and permanence in terms of the entity. In terms of the entity, it is not permanent, it is changing. In terms of continuum, we say it is permanent, which means the continuum lasts forever. Right? So, self per se is impermanent. And how we account for the self, that the karma that we accumulate in this life, and we carry this karma to the next life and so forth, how do we account for that? Is on the basis of the continuum. Okay, very good. Okay, now the point is, this self, which is so solid, independent, permanent, that is to be rejected. So, it says 243 now, 243. Some see it as ubiquitous, and for some, the person is the mere size of the body. The self to be ubiquitous means self to be omnipresent, the self existing everywhere in the universe. So that is the position of Vaisheshiks and Samkhya. Samkhya and Vaisheshiks, and they believe in this concept that the self to be universal, self to be cosmic. And the others, the person is the mere size of the body, like Nirgrantha. Nirgrantha meaning Jains. Jainism believe the self to be the mere size of the body, which means, say, what size of the body that you have, that is yourself. Okay. Some see it as a mere particle. So the mere particle, who is that? I don't remember that too well. Okay. So some say that we are constituted of the particles. We consider, okay, that is more like Charvakas. Charvakas say we are nothing but made of the atoms, that's it. Atoms. What really exists there is just the atoms. So when atoms dismantle, then the person dies. The person finishes. Then no next life, no past life, nothing. So this is Charvakas. The wise see it as non-existent. Non-existent meaning the wise see it as non-existent as permanent. The wise people see the self as non-existent, as a permanent entity. It does exist, not as a permanent entity. So those who believe that the self is the size of the body, self is the particles, and so forth, self is particle. The Charvakas, they don't really believe as permanent. They are more like the hedonist. Hedonists, they believe the self to be just one life finish. And then the self to be ubiquitous, the self to be the omnipresent. They believe the self to be permanent. Okay, the wise see it as non-existence. And how can you classify those people who see the self as non-existent, as a permanent? How can we say that they are wise? It is only to be done through your analysis, by resorting to analysis, by subjecting them to analysis, and then you decide through using your intelligence, you decide which is more sensible. Whichever is sensible, more sensible, that is considered as wise. Okay, 244. How can what is permanent? So in fact, these analyses, they are very helpful. This analysis very helpful because in this life, of course, this life we are very fortunate to have met with, particularly India. India is so rich with the different traditions, whereas should we come in contact, say for example, you're born in a place where there's only one philosophy, no choice of other philosophy, then it's quite dangerous that unless we have the faculty of intelligence, we may easily go into blind faith in those traditions. So therefore, if you engage in this kind of analysis, that would be extremely helpful. We will learn these, we'll acquire this skill, and these skills we will take to next lives. Next lives, we'll have these skills. And then very recently, I met one girl, and she said something very interesting. She was actually born in a country which is very remote. Hardly you find Buddhism there, right? Buddha's teachings there. And then she was already into one tradition, and properly following the tradition, a proper member, became a proper member, whatever you may call that label. I don't want to call the label there. Became a proper member of that tradition. And then the doctrines which she was studying, it always clashed with her thinking. No, it can't be true. She was already formally enrolled there. No, it doesn't really make sense. Then finally, somehow she got one book, small book, on the Four Noble Truths. She read it, and she says, wow, this is my home. This is where I should be going. This makes sense. Then instantly she went to explore where this book came from, where this teaching came from. So only if, and how many of such people are there? So less. Whereas if we learn these philosophy, if we learn these reasonings, the ability to reason, if we acquire these skills in this life, then next life we will automatically inherit these qualities, right? We'll inherit these qualities, and you may not remember, say day one you're born, somebody says, the self is permanent, impermanent, you have no clue. But you have the same, as you grow older, then somebody says self is permanent, you may not be happy. Some is impermanent, you say, yes, that makes sense. So these abilities you will be able to carry if you train yourself in this kind of training from this life. Otherwise it's very dangerous. Okay, so 244 is very interesting. How can what is permanent be harmed? If the self is, so why we engage ourselves in the philosophy, study philosophy? Because I want to get rid of my miseries and I want to be happy. Miseries meaning harms. I don't want harms. I don't want miseries. I don't want pains. I don't want harms. So if the self is permanent, how can this self be harmed in the first place? Because permanent means it should not change. Earlier, when you were with your mother, when you were with your parents at a young age, you are at peace. And then later on you start to settle on your own, then you start having more problems, right? Problems, harms come later, which means there's a change happening. If the self is permanent, then the change is not there. So if you're happy in the beginning, you're always happy. So there's no harm there. How can what is permanent be harmed? Or unharmed be liberated. And if you're unharmed, liberate means someone who's in pain and then liberated. Again, there's a change. Liberate also has connotation change. What is unharmed cannot be liberated because unharmed is always unharmed. Liberation is irrelevant for one whose self is permanent. So therefore, the liberation, I want to be liberated. With this practice, I will be liberated. So liberation makes sense only if the self is impermanent. For liberation is totally irrelevant if the self is permanent. Okay, so these are the reasonings. 245. If the self exists, it is Okay, if the self exists with the permanent entity, if the self exists with the permanent entity, it is inappropriate to think there is no self and false to claim one attains nirvana through certain knowledge of reality. Okay, now let's say from what we have learned thus far, in case if what we have learned thus far is true, say the miseries which we have, they all come from the ignorance. And the ignorance can be eradicated by what? By introducing the wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom is the mindset whose apprehension of the object tallies with reality. And what is the reality? Reality is that things are all empty of objective existence. Okay, if this is true, how can we know whether or not this is true? This we have to subject to analysis. We have to subject this to analysis. We have to study more. Because that we are at the initial stage, if this were to be true, then finally, in order to be liberated, what should we be doing? We should discover the reality. What's the reality? That nothing exists objectively real, nothing exists solidly real, nothing exists as permanently objectively real. Okay, if this is how the liberation is to be achieved, then it says 245, if the self exists as a permanent reality, then it is inappropriate to think that there is no self and that there is no self. Right? If you think that the self exists as a permanent entity, how can you think of the self to be of selfless nature? No need. I'm not saying it's selfless of selfless nature. Then without knowing the selfless nature, how can you have the wisdom? Because the wisdom is the wisdom of the selflessness. Without the wisdom, how can you be liberated? How can you remove the ignorance? Without removing the ignorance, how can you be liberated? So he said, to think there is no self and false to claim one attains nirvana. Without removing the ignorance, how can you achieve freedom? How can you achieve nirvana? So you cannot claim to have achieved nirvana. Through certain knowledge of reality. What reality? The reality of selflessness. Right? It's so beautiful. Okay. So the point is, finally, what should we be convinced of? We should be convinced of the concept of the selflessness. That the selflessness is true, is not what the doctrine dictates. It is the fact, it's the reality. Right? This is what we have to discover. We are not to take it blindly. Okay, 246. If it exists as liberation, it should not be non-existent there before. Okay, now this is the philosophical discussion. This, on the one hand, I would say that this is a very good point. This is a very good side of the India's classical philosophical exchanges amongst the philosophers. So they actually meet and actually debate, and in the process, if one cannot defend your position, then slowly there's no choice other than to switch your position here and there. Because if you don't switch, then you end up in contradiction. If you end up in contradiction, then you have to give up. You give up, you have to surrender, you have to be converted. This is a huge bet in those days. So therefore they tend to switch their position. So now, because of seeing this, if there's a sense of self is permanent, then you are solidifying the self. If you solidify the self, then you keep grasping at it. If you keep grasping at it, you are not released from it. Freedom is not happening. Right? You just keep grasping at it. Then there's no freedom. Now to be freed, the grasping should be released. To release the grasping, you should see that there's no basis for me to grasp at. The self does not exist the way as solidly as I see. Self is not as permanently solid as I see. So once you release only when you see that, then you can release it. Otherwise, if you don't see that, you will keep grasping at it. Keep grasping at it, there's no release. Without release, liberation is not there. Nirvana is not there. Okay. So now they say that, okay, yes, liberation is possible. So because you can release. If you release, then you have to see that self is non-existent there. Yes. Okay. Then at the time of liberation, there's no permanent self. Again, they say that yes, actually, before the liberation of self, this is how the liberation is achieved. Then at the point of liberation, when you are actually liberated, then who is liberated? There is the self again, the permanent self there. This is there's a switch in the position. They say that one can realize the selflessness when you are in the process, when you actually are liberated, when you reach the result. During the path, you see the selflessness. And when you reach the goal, the resultant state, then again there is someone who achieved the goal. Who is that? A permanent self. So this is how they switch their position. So it says 246. If it exists, it means permanent self exists at liberation. It should not be non-existent before. Then early also it should be there. If it's permanent, permanent means it should be forever unchanging, forever remaining there unchanging. If it's a time of liberation, it should be there before the liberation also. It should not be non-existent before. It is explained that what is seen without anything is its nature. So what is self? What is this self? Permanent self? Is a permanent self, of course, when Aryadeva, when the Buddha described the self is described with relation to the attributes of the body and the mind. So there are the factors involved, other factors involved to explain the self. Whereas if you see the self as permanent, then there should be no factors of the body and the mind involved to explain what the self is, because self is permanent, it's so independent of the body and mind. It says that if it exists at liberation, it should not be non-existent before. It is explained because it should be, if it exists in liberation, then it should also exist at the before. Because it is explained that what is seen without anything is its nature, meaning that this self as a permanent should be something which exists. Explain that what is seen without anything, without any attributes of other things, independent, in isolation, without anything means that the self exists in isolation of the body and the mind, right? Body and mind as permanent. So this is how you describe a permanent self. If such a thing exists without anything, without depending on anything else, without depending on anything else means if it exists now, it should exist yesterday. If it exists yesterday, it should exist. If it exists at the time of liberation, it should be existing at the non-liberation time as well. Okay, 247. If the impermanent discontinues, how could they be grasped at present? If indeed this were true, no one would have ignorance either. Okay, so these, in the monastic universities, the rigorous debates, trainings are being given. So whereas for the non-monastic, the people who do not get the opportunity in the monastic universities, for us the best thing is to try to read these books and to learn, acquire these skills of the reasoning. So that is so precious. Okay, if it says that, then okay, say, if the self is not permanent, then the self should be impermanent. If the self is impermanent, then the question arises, how can you account for the reincarnation? This is the very common question that comes. If you don't believe, you interact with people who follow the philosophy of a permanent self, who accept the self to be Atman, self to be soul, and so forth. Right? You interact with those people and tell them that the self is, and then those people should have a little bit of understanding of their philosophy, not just they see a movie, right? And then they explain to you. No, somebody who has some exposure to philosophy. You meet with those people and talk to them, and then see what is their response when you say that self does not exist as a permanent entity. It is not permanent. Then see what is their first reaction. They will ask you with a question. The question is, if there's no self, don't you believe in karma? So the answer is, yes, we believe in karma. Don't you believe in reincarnation? Right? So more than karma, they will ask you reincarnation. If there is no self, then don't you believe in reincarnation? No, the next life, no past life? Answer is what? Yes, we believe in reincarnation. Then if the self is not permanent, then what transmigrates to the next life? If you believe in reincarnation on the one hand, on the other hand you do not believe that self is permanent. So what reincarnates then? This is a question to you. Right? This is the most common question coming to us. So what is your response? If the self is not permanent, then don't you believe in reincarnation? Don't you believe in the next birth? Answer is, yes, we do believe in rebirth. But how can you, what rebirth, what transmigrates to the next life if the self is not permanent? What's the answer? Anyone? Anyone?
I think the word self may not be used at that. In Buddhism, I think instead of self.
Okay, let's say give the answer as though like not from the point of view of someone, but on your behalf. How would you give the answer?
It may be the consciousness that transmigrates.
Self does not transmigrate?
Yes, instead of self, in other language you may say that the self does not exist, and it is not the self that carries the goes to the next life. It may be in Hindu they say there is a soul.
No, what is your point?
My point is
the self is permanent, impermanent.
Permanency of self. It can be, as I said before, it can be permanent.
No, from what we have studied according to the text, if you
let's
say if you are convinced with what is being said here in the text, then what we have to say is the self is impermanent, but continuum-wise, is eternal, meaning it lasts forever. The self lasts forever, but it is not permanent. It is still impermanent, right? Okay. So when you say the self is impermanent, then the question that comes to you would be that if the self is impermanent, then at the time of death, the self doesn't go to the next birth. This question.
So in that case, there's the consciousness that goes to the next birth.
Okay, self does not go.
Self does not go.
It doesn't go? Is this what he's saying?
Yes.
Okay, then this is a problem. Okay, we have to say that the self goes to the next life. Self does go to the next birth. Self goes, and the mind or the consciousness goes there, right? But the self which travels to the next life is still impermanent. It travels to the next life as in the form of impermanence, not in the form of permanence. This is what we should be able to answer, right? That the self,
impermanent in the sense that it changes.
it changes, exactly. It keeps changing because there's a change in the body and the mind happening. So what body you take, not this body, the body of the Pardo, intermediate body. Intermediate state body is what you acquire. So, and the mind, it goes with these two things. And then the next life, when you connect to the next life, then even the body of the intermediate state is also discarded. And then it acquires the body of the next birth. So this is how this is constant change, but as a continuum, the self continues. The self continues in an impermanent state. Okay, yes, Antonelli.
I just wanted to understand if there is a question that we could ask them, the contrary of this. I mean, if it is permanent, how can it transmigrate?
Okay, this is a good question. So,
yeah.
On behalf of them, I'll give the answer.
Yeah.
Yes. If it is permanent, only if the self is permanent, then it can transmigrate to the next life. Because if it is impermanent, then when you die, it discontinues. Whereas, because it is permanent, right, even at the time of death, it remains. It is permanent. So therefore, it transmigrates to the next life.
No, I mean to say that it remains, you could say,
Yes.
then it is that the body which goes into a permanent self. But if it is, what did you just say? No, you said that because it is permanent, yeah, so it cannot move. I mean, in the very beginning of this,
this is the author.
today's class. Okay, this is the author.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a Buddhist.
but permanence, if one tries to analyze it, one finds that there cannot be action and movement in permanence.
This is according to Buddhism, not according to us.
Okay. So they say that. But also the concept of impermanence as something that ends at death, it is their understanding. Now in this case, your understanding of impermanence. Because
so my understanding of impermanence
that's something
is that
when you die,
me,
that dies. Yeah.
me as the advocate of the permanent self,
Yes, yes.
my position of the impermanence at the time of death, right? Impermanence means at the time of death, the person disappears altogether. That is impermanence.
So if one was to use this argument against you that how can permanent move to the next life, then one has to debate about what impermanence means, whether it is connected to death or not.
Okay, so the point is, if the self is permanent, then even at the time of death, the self remains. Self remains even after the death. So after death, then this self will acquire a next body.
Then one would use the argument that Ankit had propounded, that we believe in a continuum which is eternal but impermanent. Then what about that argument? Would that work?
Okay, for me it doesn't work.
For you it does not work.
Yeah.
That means you are not open to take anybody's ideas.
No, the point is,
I really want to understand how these people were debating. That I am like this and I am permanently only thinking
the point is,
like
either I ask you questions, you give the answer, or you ask me questions and I give the answer.
Okay.
Right? So not that, not like, say for example, my position, does it make sense to you? I will always say no.
Okay.
It's my job. Right? So only thing is that either you have to ask me questions and you should put me into difficulty, or I should ask you a question and then you realize that okay, what he said is correct. And so this is how we have to go about.
So this is the way in which people debate, like
oh
in the
yeah, just finally, this is known as what is that? In Tibetan, what is that? In English, not English, I think it's Latin. What is that? In Tibetan it is Tengyur. We said last time, syllogism, and then the other one is, in fact, the Antonio would be the right person. The absurdity. Reductio ad absurdity.
Yeah.
Ad absurdum.
Yeah. Okay.
Reductio ad absurdum, which means that I pick up your points, right? So how the debate follows is that I pick up your points. I first listen to you. I pick up your points. Once I've got a point, then I will use those points to point to your internal contradiction.
Okay.
Once you cannot give the answer, once you cannot come out of this contradiction, then you have to give up one of your points, because we are trapped in two contradictions, 2 points which are contradictory. Either you give your point A, you give your point B. Likewise, you can debate against me by throwing questions to me, by using my points, which I said, right? Which I said, my positions between A and B or C, then you point to the contradictions, either between 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. And then if I cannot give the answer, if I cannot come out of the contradiction, I have to give up either position A, B or C. So this is how the debates happen.
So this requires a tremendous skillfulness of knowing each shade of even each word that you use.
This is very important. It is for this reason that Acharya Dharmakirti, Acharya Dharmakirti, he spent few years house with the opponent in his house in the disguise as a servant. Right? Acharya Dharmakirti, he was such a brilliant Buddhist logician. And then there was another logician, so famous logician, and who was a non-Buddhist logician. So Acharya Dharmakirti, he knew that his counterpart has brilliant logical tactics to trap you. So to learn that, if he goes there, please teach me that, they will not teach you, right? They will not teach you. So what he did was that he went there as in a guise of a shepherd, and he asked for a job. And he was a very young boy, Acharya Dharmakirti, and he was a cute boy. So the logician, he gave him a job, say like a distant, not at the inner circle, but the outer circle job was given as a shepherd. So he was looking after the cattle, and then he showed so many extraordinary qualities. So this somehow the logician, the master, came to know about. And then the master, just observing, through his own observation of this young boy, he was very fascinated. He is very brilliant, and also there's a tremendous quality with this young boy. So he brought him closer and closer towards the inner circle. Finally, he was brought into the innermost circle. And then Acharya Dharmakirti, he was very smart. He made friends with the wife of this logician. And then from the wife he came to know that the logician would teach the most sophisticated techniques, logic techniques, to his wife. So for that, the logician's wife and Acharya Dharmakirti, they had a conversation, had a discussion, settlement, where Acharya Dharmakirti was to hide under the bed, and the logician used to teach the wife in the night, only in the night, in the daytime no, only in the night, in the bed. So Acharya Dharmakirti, he would tie a thread at the toe, the big thumb of the wife, and then the logician was teaching the wife, and Acharya Dharmakirti was listening. And then when he could not understand something, not clear, he would pull the string. Then the wife would ask again, the same point. Then he would again give the answer. After getting everything, this young boy disappeared. So look, this is how they spend so much time to know the position of the other side. And then the young boy disappeared, and a few days' time, the young boy sent the declaration. Anyone who likes to debate with me should come. I'm there. So then the word spread everywhere. And then that logician, the master, he was exceptional, renowned logician. He did not even care to look at these advertisements, these proclamations. And then so many debaters, they went to debate with him, and Acharya Dharmakirti just defeated all of them, one after one. Slowly he was becoming like a shooting star. And everywhere, even amongst the non-Buddhists, there's one guy there in the Buddhist denomination who is so bright, he's been defeated. Today this much of people were defeated, today this much of people are defeated. So it became more and more widely known. Then eventually it came to the ear of that master. And who is that guy? He becomes so angry. Who is that guy? He came to realize that it was his own servant. Then two of them defeated. Two of them had the debate. Yeah. So initially he was just using the techniques which are so commonly used. He did not know that he was listening to other than the bed. He did not know that. Then slowly he could easily defend so well Acharya Dharmakirti. Finally there was no choice that other than to use his unique methods and techniques to attack others. He used them, and still they were all easily tackled, and he was defeated. Otherwise, even Acharya Aryadeva, if he used those techniques without knowing them so well, he can easily get lost. Yeah. And so some examples, one or two examples were given in the commentary. Very interesting in debate formulations. Very interesting. You cannot say yes, you cannot say no. This is how the debate, they were designed in such a way, just to trap you. Yeah. Okay.
But yet, sorry,
Yes.
because I'm fascinated to understand this. How much are the tricks and the techniques and how much is the content?
Exactly, this is a question.
Gain or lose?
Very good question. Do you follow the question? So with the debate, we get the impression as though like if you know the tricks, the contents may not matter as much. The tricks can simply trap you, right? Okay. So this is the point. So therefore, the point is, oftentimes what I say is that to really understand the philosophy so well, you have to depend on the very authoritative, the classics, master the books. And these books, they are so sophisticated with the debate skills, the contents all mixed up, and even the vocabularies, linguistics. So therefore, saying some of the linguistic parts, if you know them, if you untangle them, the same thing will come over and over again. So I tell people that these small things should not hamper you to know the content. Oftentimes what happens is that you get stuck with a small thing, you don't understand it, it's so easy actually, you can untangle it so easily, you get stuck there because you didn't learn it. Once you learn it, it's so easy. And then you can actually go into the content. Otherwise, you cannot even penetrate through the linguistic difficulties, and then you cannot reach to the content, right? So now the point is that if you really want to prove, or if you really want to convince that what the Buddha taught is something very beneficial and profound, then you should not be hampered by the linguistic complications. You should be expert in this as well. So therefore, deliberately, he went there, so the linguistic part, he cannot be trapped. Once that is cleared, then he has to go to the content. Going into the content, of course, are Acharya Chandradev, Dharmakirti, Acharya Dharmakirti, who can compete with the content. Yeah. So therefore, both are required. And for practice, you should depend on a very kind teacher who may not trap you into the linguistic part. He will give you directly the content. Right? Okay, we'll stop here because the screening, the Buddha movie screening is happening. The Buddha episode. This is usually what I always recommend people to watch it because I myself watched it, and this is extremely beneficial to activate particularly the seed of compassion. How the movie was made, the series was made, is there's a tremendous emphasis and so beautifully made to display the Buddha's quality of compassion. It's amazing. Okay, so we'll quickly do.
The name of this Pandit was Pandit Mandan Mishra.
Mandan Mishra. Okay, Pandit Mandan Mishra. Okay. Let's turn to page 309. Page 309 for the dedication prayer, the blue book. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind of full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge to the Triple Gem. I confess the negativities individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all the beings. I hold the precious Buddha in my heart. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. A path of the union of emptiness and compassion is lucidly explained by the protector of the Dharma and the beings in the snowland. You are the lotus soul that Tenzin Gyatso, we supplicate you that your wishes are fulfilled spontaneously. May the operations of evil thoughts and deeds of the negative forces of humans or non-humans who harbor malice through perverted prayers against the teachings of the Buddhas be totally vanquished through the power of the truth of the three jewels. Throughout my future lifetimes, may I always be guided by Aram and be able to uphold the Dharma in general and the teachings on dependent origination in particular, even across my life.